Verben mit accusative. So German verbs with accusative case. In today's lesson, I will show you which verbs require you to use accusative case. Small hint in advance, almost all of them. But some of them require you to even use the accusative twice. Hi, my name is Jan and I'm your German teacher here on EasyDeutsch, your YouTube channel for German grammar. Today's topic is Verben mit accusative, so verbs with accusative complement, aka accusative object. And with the help of my ebook, I will show you now everything you have to know. So let's switch into my ebook. So we're here now in my ebook, German Grammar Explained Easily. Today's topic is verbs with accusative objects, so Verben mit accusativ. Let's find the lesson here in my table of content. There we go. So let's zoom in. Accusative complements, you may know them also by the name accusative object, so accusativ object. Those are accusative words that are complement, that are obligatory to put there, so you cannot leave them out. And actually many verbs are using those because that's the default way for the verbs. If you don't really know what's a complement yet, I highly recommend you to watch the part 1 of this series of videos first. There I will explain to you what's the difference between complement, Ergänzung, and adjunct, so Angabe. I will link that in the info cards right now for you, upper right corner. So usually the accusative complement, aka accusative object, can only be a person or a thing. And most verbs use an accusative object next to the mandatory subject, which is the nominative complement. If you don't know what's a nominative complement or want to learn more about it, video in the upper right corner. And some verbs not only have one accusative object, they have two, so a double accusative object. So let's have a look at a few examples to make it more obvious for you. We have here, for example, der Mann besucht seine Eltern. So the man is visiting his parents. So the man is the subject, and then seine Eltern is the accusative complement, aka accusative object. And the sentence der Mann besucht, so the man visits, alone doesn't make a lot of sense because it's like, who is he visiting? We don't know. You need to put the object here. So who is he visiting? Because without it, there's not much sense in this sentence. So this is the default way usually. Also, kennt den Mann. So he knows the man. The man is the accusative complement, and without it, the sentence doesn't make sense. Because in English, you can say he knows, but in German, kennt doesn't make sense at all. We need the accusative there, otherwise it makes no sense whatsoever. And even in English, he knows only if the situation is 100% clear. In German, even if it's clear here, we cannot drop this part here because it's mandatory to put it. And more about that in a second. First, the word order. There's a very specific thing you have to know. In a normal sentence, everything is regular. You can put on position 1 whatever you want. Remember my video about position 1, the info cards if you don't. Position 1 is 100% flexible in German. If it's something else than the subject simply moves behind the verb. Verb stays position 2. But here you have to pay attention if it's a yes-no question. So if the verb is in position 1, the verb is followed by the subject, and only afterwards you put anything else. So like the accusative complement, you cannot switch the position of those two. That would not make sense. So the subject comes first here. The only option you can actually put the accusative in front of the nominative here is if the accusative is a pronoun and the nominative is not. So for example, besucht sie der Mann, and sie replaces seine Eltern. then it's possible, but not mandatory to do it like this. So you can still say besucht der Mann sie. That's why, in order to make it easier for you, keep it there. If you want to know more about the word order with the pronouns, please check out the video about pronouns, about personal pronouns, that I just linked for you in the info card. So usually, if both are the same, so both are nouns, nominative always in front of accusative. If one of them is a pronoun, pronoun first, but not mandatory. It's still the nominative, the subject can always be right behind the verb. And now let's have a look at double accusative complements. So actually verbs that use a double accusative, so that use twice the accusative. There are not that many, they're actually just 5. Abfragen, abhören, lehren, nennen, and kosten. So, mein Vater fragt mich die Vokabeln ab. So, my dad is, well, checking vocabulary with me. Abfragen means to actually check your knowledge. So he's asking you a question about a topic. And it's here, mich. So who is he asking? And about what is he asking? So mich, who, and what, the vocabulary. And actually both are direct objects. So that's why both get the accusative complement. Nobody is receiving something here. Both are used for the action. So my dad is using me for the action and he's also using vocabulary for the action. That's why both are accusative case. But keep in mind, often the obvious part is actually just dropped. Like mich, you can drop that because it's very obvious. Mein Vater fragt mich die Vokabeln ab, or mein Vater fragt die Vokabeln ab. If, for example, my mom comes in and asks me, hey, what are you doing? Hey, mein Vater fragt gerade die Vokabeln ab. You can drop this here if it's obvious. With the other accusative complements, you actually can't. But here, with those, you can. To be honest, most of the time, you can. But my recommendation, as long as you're not 100% sure that you can drop it, put it there. Don't drop it. Second verb here, der Lehrer lehrt uns die deutsche Sprache. So the teacher is teaching us German language. So uns and German language are both accusative objects because they're both direct objects here. Yeah, uns is a little bit questionable if it's a direct object, but nevertheless, it's accusative. It's not dative here. And lehren, to teach, is double accusative. But in informal language, you often just drop, again, the person who's receiving the lesson because it's obvious, because usually it's the people who get the lesson or the teacher who is saying this, or somebody who's asking either the teacher or the students, and then it's quite obvious who is getting the lesson. So you can also say der Lehrer lehrt deutsche Sprache oder die deutsche Sprache. And it's very similar with a very basic verb that you probably know. Der Apfel kostet mich einen Euro. To be honest, probably you have never heard it with this pronoun, but in theory, you have to put it there. Der Apfel kostet mich einen Euro, so the apple costs me €1. I assume you can do this in English too, but it's the same thing. You usually drop the me because it's very, very obvious. If I want to buy the apple, I will have to pay €1, so it costs me €1. So it's the same thing, double accusative object. That's why double accusative. And with those, you can usually drop it. With the last one here, nennen, you can't. Nennen, to name, nennt mich einen Idioten. So he names, so he calls me an idiot. Mich and idiot are both accusative, and you cannot omit the mich here because it's never obvious who is he calling an idiot. And also in English, you have to say he calls me an idiot because otherwise it could also be he or she or whoever is present or whoever we are talking about. It's not obvious unless you say it. That's why here you have to name both, and it's both accusative. There is again the logic behind it with the double direct object. If you can't really grasp that, it's just 5 words. Just memorize them is my recommendation. And especially for the last one, here we have an alternative version. Well, It's not really an easier version, just an alternative version, and that's indirect speech. So Konjunktiv 1, sagt, dass ich ein Idiot sei. Both work. This sounds a little bit more educated, so this sounds a little bit more formal. He says that I am an idiot is the word-by-word translation. If you don't know Konjunktiv 1 yet, there's a video in the info cards for you that you can check out, because indirekte Rede is pretty much the only use of Konjunktiv 1. Maybe as a short summary, most verbs require somehow an accusative. Not all of them have it as a mandatory thing. So some of them you can actually use just with the nominative. It still makes a sense. But some of them you actually have to put something there. Usually just by the pure sense of the sentence, you will figure it out. So I would not put too much pressure on yourself to actually memorize the list of verbs with accusative complement. Just, if there's no preposition and the verb doesn't require any special case, it is accusative. So just go with that. That's the important information here. And when you actually have to use the accusative, you can most of the time just get it by pure sense of the sentence. What you have to pay attention to is the double accusative complement, because that's something you simply have to know, that those 5 verbs actually mean and use the accusative twice. Maybe you wonder why abhören is not in the examples. Well, it just means the exact same thing like abfragen. So that's why it's just the same thing. I did not put it in there again. It means exactly the same. Now you got a quick overview over everything connected to verbs with accusative. Verben mit Akkusativ. If you have any further questions about that, please do not hesitate to ask them in the comment section below. But there's more videos in this series. The next one will be Verben mit Dativ, so verbs that require you to use the dative case. I highly recommend you to check this one out. And if you want to support me, I highly appreciate it if you share this video with your friends, if you like the video, if you've learned a lot today, and if you haven't done it yet, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you want to support me even further, the ebook that you've just seen, you can buy this, and you can also buy up to 9 more ebooks that I wrote for you. And this is a great support so that I can actually put out more content here for you, explain the German grammar in an easy to understand way from a student's perspective. The links to all my ebooks you will find in the comment section and also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support. If you buy my ebooks, thank you very much. You will learn a lot and I can keep on doing those videos here for you. Thank you. And that's it for today. And I hope I will see you again in one of my other videos. And until then, viel Spaß und Erfolg beim Deutschlernen.